Chapter 52, Astrian's Journey to the Asteroids. Long were to tell what I have done, what suffered, with what pain, voyaged the unreal, vast unbounded deep of horrible confusion, toiled out my uncouth passage, forced to ride the intractable abyss, plunged in the womb of unoriginal night and chaos wild. Paradise Lost, Book 10. The astonishment and delight of my friends were better imagined than described. I hastened to bring in my brave rescuers, and they were greeted with acclamations of joy. Elphine was at first overwhelmed with confusion, but the princess received her with open arms. Peace and happiness now ruled the hour, and when we were all assembled at the joyous feast which followed, my Lady Chumavat related the amusing incidents of the rescue. The palace rang with applause and mirth. On the following day the royal ambassador departed with his suite. This distinguished nobleman had been deeply impressed by the princess's beauty and loveliness of character, the scene that had transpired, and the courtesies he had received from all. And he was so shocked at Diviger's villainous plot, he determined to resign his office and dissolve his connection with the court. On the third day, Lord Montabar, accompanied by Lord Chumavat and my old jailer Hardagoth, arrived at the palace. They gave an animated description of Diviger's rage at the escape of his prisoner and the failure of his plot. The Grand Duke and Altafora bestowed distinguished courtesies on Lord Chumavat and Hardagoth, in which my lady also received her full share from the princess. The same night, the equatorial regions were visited by a meteoric shower of great severity. It was described by those who witnessed it as one of the heaviest that had been known for many years. The meteorites were of enormous size, surpassing any before seen. Fortunately, no lives were lost, the great bulk of the shower having fallen into the ocean. The occurrence of the downfall at this season of the year was so unusual, it excited great interest among astronomers and scientists. The moons Rohazan and Arian, which were on that side of the planet at the time, seemed to have received the full force of the shower, for they were completely enveloped by the cloud of meteorites. The next morning, Altafora rushed into the reception room from the private telegraph office of the palace, his countenance glowing with excitement and delight. "News!" he cried. "News from Asterion!" handing a dispatch to the Duke. As a long time had elapsed since Asterion's departure, all had felt a great anxiety and solicitude for his safety. The terrible dangers of the journey were well known. Some had even given him up for lost. The Duke read the message. South Pole, Ethervolt Station, number 4, 10 o'clock a.m. To His Highness Athelion Thuramavat, Grand Duke Regnant of Mandal Ultima, greeting. I have the honor to announce to you that I have at this moment returned from my tour of the inspection among the asteroids, have news of the highest importance to communicate to your Highness, and the Astronomer Royal shall immediately embark on the fleetest airship. If no unforeseen delays prevent, shall reach the palace, 8 o'clock p.m. I have the honor to be, etc., Asterion. We have looked forward to the results of this journey with great interest, said the Duke. Dispatches were sent to several kingdoms. As evening drew near, the grand salon of the palace was thronged with a brilliant assembly, representing the royalty, wealth, and learning of Mars. The Grand Duke and the officers of the household, King Polath, Prince Harovian, and Duke Onagar, with their suites, their astronomers royal, Solaris, and several of his colleagues, members of the Royal Academy of Sciences, and professors of the Royal College, members of scientific and learned societies, military and naval officers, and distinguished representatives of the bench and bar, constituting a display which would have commanded the profound respect and admiration of any international congress on this terrestrial globe. Precisely at 8 o'clock, the doors were opened, and Asterion, escorted by the Prince Altafora and Harovian, accompanied by Viviand and Barras, entered the salon. Every eye was fixed on these intrepid interplanetary voyagers. Asterion looked pale and careworn. An expression of deep anxiety appeared on his countenance, whose lineaments displayed the highest order of intellect and courage. His eyes shone with a light as if from the radiating orbs amidst which he roamed. His spiritual presence, lofty air and bearing, were almost a realization of Milton's Ithuriel as he landed on earth from his flight through the celestial spheres. His reception was a grand ovation. Tumultuous applause rang through the salon. It was a spontaneous outburst of homage to science and the man who represented it in its highest and noblest department, astronomy. Science represents one form of divine truth as displayed in the material world. The voice of science is as the voice of God, and 'tis meant that royalty, wealth, and power should yield obeisance and submission to that mighty voice which unfolds and elucidates the mysterious laws that govern the universe of worlds. Compared with this magnificent ovation, how utterly trivial and insignificant appear all the pompous ceremonials of courts and the ostentatious displays of wealth and fashion, which absorb the thoughts and aspirations of millions of earth's gay and frivolous throngs. It was with difficulty the princess succeeded in extricating Asterion and his companions from the enthusiastic felicitations of the assembly. Order being restored, they ascended the platform, and after a brief expression of thanks for the honors bestowed, Asterion addressed the assembly as follows. Dear friends, I have the honor to announce to you that I have returned from the vast zone of asteroids lying between our planet and Jupiter, sweeping in an orbit of nearly 600 million miles circuit around the Sun, and which at once occupied by the planet Luzo Avanti Dorama, or the Great Shining One, now called Pluto, the fragments of which constitute this asteroidal belt, a revolving desert of ruins, sad mementos of departing grandeur and glory. All the planets of our system, as you well know, are united in one paternal bond to their great original parent, the Sun, by the power of his attraction. They are also united in one common bond of brotherhood by the great cosmomagnetic currents emanating from their poles and flying from planet to planet with a speed far outstripping that of electricity or light. It is by means of these currents we are enabled to wing our flight through the realm of space from one world to another. These interplanetary journeys are attended with a great difficulty and danger. Ceaseless vigilance is required to keep our ethervolt car within the narrow boundaries of these streams and follow the great curves produced by the orbital motions of the planets. We are also liable to encounter the great belts of meteorites which traverse the orbits of many of our planets and hurl their excuse me. We are also liable to encounter the great belts of meteorites which traverse the orbits of many of our planets and hurl their terrible cannonade in all directions around us. All these, together with other vicissitudes and dangers, not necessary to mention, render these journeys full of peril. In this trip we took the track of the great Martio-Jovian magnetic current running between our planet and Jupiter, about 350 million miles distant. Reaching the inner ring of the asteroidal belt, we paused a while to examine Medusa, the nearest planetoid, then traversing its entire breadth over 200 million miles to Thule, the most remote, making trips here and there in various directions along the belt, and what I have discovered confirms the results of my former observations. Some of the larger planetoids, from 1 to 300 miles in diameter, shine with different colored light. Others are surrounded by atmospheres, the presence of which is impossible to explain otherwise than that they are fragments of the original Plutonian atmosphere still clinging to them after the explosion. The lesser asteroidals and still smaller fragments, of which there are countless millions, quite too small to be discovered by our telescopes, are composed of the same mineral and metallic materials, with the exception of a few unknown elements, of which all planets are made. They all show the evidences of fusion, plainly indicating the intense heat to which they were subjected at the planet's explosion. I have brought some specimens of fragments which I shall be happy to present to the Astronomical Society. Vivian and Barras now opened a chest and drew out a number of specimens, which were passed around and examined with great interest by the learned scientists and astronomers. They resemble in all respects the specimens of asteroids which fall on our planet during our meteoric showers, said several geologists. I have long been of the opinion that many of our meteorite showers are stray offshoots which have wandered away from the asteroidal belt, remarked the Astronomer Royal. Isolated meteoric streams and clouds float along the various portions of the interplanetary space, filled with countless millions of these smaller fragments, said Strn. Perhaps one of the conservative offices of our comets which sweep through these vast realms may be able to gather up these deserters and restore them to their asteroidal ranks again, remarked one professor. I am rather inclined to the opinion that these lively celestial corpuscles, whisking their gauzy skirts around the interplanetary stage, are scattering these fragments around among our planets as mementos to remind them of their lost brother, remarked another. The whole asteroidal zone is filled with vast clouds of mineral and metallic dust, ground to powder by the forces of the explosion, continued Asterion. The particles are continually clashing against and uniting with each other, the smaller with the larger, and these are continually increasing in size and joining in their turn with the others. Which gives us every reason to expect that in time they will all unite and roll up together, forming a new planet, said the astronomer Solaris. Hardly a new one, remarked one of his colleagues. Like the phoenix rising from his ashes, it would be the same old Pluto, Revidusus. Having been purified by fire, we may hope the new Pluto will be rather a better specimen than the old original, remarked another. And let us hope that the spirits of the departed Plutonians may again be reunited to their mortal bodies, to begin life over again under more favorable auspices, said a discipline of the reincarnation theory. And it will also be permitted to retain a lively recollection of the tragic winding up of their sinful career, which may teach them a wholesome moral lesson, for experience is a dear school, but fools will learn in no other, and induce them to lead better lives, suggested a disciple of the spiritual progression theory. And if this remarkable event should happen to take place in our day, said Altiphora, I propose that we take the new planet under our especial supervisions, and discard the old name of Pluto, which Lieutenant Hamilton informs me is the cognomen of the terrestrial mythological monarch of Hell. We christen it by the name of our distinguished interplanetary navigator, Asterion. The prince's suggestion was received with applause. Asterion expressed his thanks for a compliment and resumed. As we traversed the zone, while the armies of revolving asteroids were flying swiftly past us, we were beset with dangers on every side. Continual watchfulness alone saved us from destruction. Days and nights were passed without sleep. In many parts of this asteroidal chaos, the great cosmic and molecular forces are displayed on the scale of terrible grandeur. Millions of the larger asteroids and many of the planetoids, heated by the energy of the chemical action going on in their interiors and the impact of smaller masses, are revolving globes of red-hot metal and minerals. Vast fields of small masses, mingling with clouds of meteoric dust and covering millions of miles in extent, are like boundless oceans of flame, over which the sheets of cosmic lightning cast a lurid glare. Tornadoes, compared with which the cyclones that sweep along the fiery cloud belts of Jupiter are as gentle breezes, rage and tear through this horrible chaos with indescribable fury. Should any of our planets encounter these flaming deserts, all animal and vegetable life would be instantly consumed, oceans dissipated in vapor, and the planet converted into a molten globe. On our return passage, we encountered one of these tempests. Fortunately, we were on its outer edge, else we should have met with instant destruction. We took refuge on the lee side of a cooled asteroid, nearly 200 miles in diameter. It was a mass of igneous rock and metal. We succeeded in anchoring our car to it, and were swept several million miles out of our course, the asteroidal screening us from the awful cannonade of meteors pouring around us in tempests of fire. Finally, we came to an open space, cut loose the anchor, put our cosmic motor to its fullest power, and dashed through the inner circumference of the belt into the free planetary space. Tumultuous applause rang through the salon as Astrian related these thrilling scenes. "How did your ether volt sustain the fiery ordeal?" asked Astronomer Solaris. "Our brave Na-Taraz, ship of the stars, bore it well," Astrian replied, "but her brightness and beauty are gone forever," and a tear stood out in his eye. "Every part of her surface is battered, scorched, and blackened, and as if she had passed through the tempests of the infernus." "Three cheers for the brave Astrian and his gallant ship of stars!" exclaimed Altiphora, and the applause was made the welkin ring. The Duke, accompanied by the astronomer, ascended to the platform and affixed a royal medal blazing with jewels to Astrian's breast, and other medals to Vidian and Burras. Then the astronomer, holding up a splendid memorial, "The Royal Astronomical Society dedicates this to the ship of the stars. Our brave interplanetary navigator shall, with due ceremony, affix it to her summit, and that gallant ship shall be awarded the highest place among the trophies of the Royal Observatory." Astrian and his companions blushed like a trio of bashful schoolboys at the honors bestowed among them, and Duke Onagar made a speech of thanks in their behalf. Astrian then resumed. "I now come to the subject of far greater importance related to our moons, Arunus and Rohanza." At these words, the assembly manifested earnest attention. "Our planet, as you are aware, in its revolution around the sun, annually encounters the showers from the great meteoric belt traversing its orbit. While the planet is in a measure protected by its atmosphere, which consumes to ashes the greater part of the masses before they reach the surface, and our cities are protected from the larger masses by their screens, our moons, having no atmosphere, are exposed to the full brunt of the bombardment, and as time rolls on, the volumes and densities of their masses are necessarily increased. This, of course, will have the effect ultimately of disturbing the harmonious adjustment of their centripetal and centrifugal forces, the former gradually increasing and the latter diminishing. The final result, which is known to us all," then addressing the Royal Astronomer Royal, "what has been the amount of orbital disturbance during past ages?" "According to our astronomical records," replied he, "which extend back 16,000 years, our moons were more than twice their present distance and revolved much more slowly in their orbits. They were also much larger. Since that period, many great volcanic outbursts have taken place, which, by dissipating their materials into space, reduced their volume to a very great degree. They were also subjected, during vast intervals of time, to extraordinary downfalls of meteors, which has the effect of retarding their velocities and gradually beating them downwards towards the planet. About 1,000 years ago, one of our astronomers discovered, after a meteoric shower of unusual severity, that Aruna had descended 200 miles and Rohanza about 100. 200 years ago, after another similar downpour, the moon descended to their present positions with a corresponding increase of their orbital velocities and a change of appearance. "Has any appreciable descent been observed since that period?" asked Astrian. "My own observations, extending over a period of 30 years, show no deviation from their position, nor any increase in their orbital velocities." "How often have you made these observations?" 4 times each year." "And the last?" "A week ago." "No deviation noted?" "Not the slightest." "Did you notice any change in their appearance?" "None whatsoever. Aruna shone with the same mild radiance. Rohanza presented her unusual dull red color." "Why do you ask?" "As I drew near our planet on my return this morning, I paused in my flight, 10,000 miles above the pole, to observe our moons as they revolved around the night side of the western hemisphere, and I saw—" For a moment he paused, all bent forward in breathless attention. "What saw you?" asked the Astronomer Royal. "The long pent-up fires of the lunar volcanoes are awakening," he exclaimed, then pointed to the east, and in thrilling tones, "Look! See for yourself! Our moons are on fire!"